Hello, everyone. Super excited for today because we have Gloria here. Gloria, thank you for being on the show.
Hi, Caroline. I'm super excited. First, you were on my show, now I'm on yours.
I know,
So
literally,
full
you guys,
circle.
last week I got to be on Gloria's podcast, and then we are reversing roles this week. So, yeah, this is going to be great. These episodes might even be out at similar times. So, we'll talk all about where to find that later. But before we get into all things inner child, relationships, all of your specialties, can you just share a little bit of your backstory? How did you become a psychotherapist? How did you get into inner child and relationship work?
Yes, absolutely. Well, the story kind of goes back to when I was little, and I talk a lot about my childhood, but the one thing that really stood out to me the most was I spent a lot of my childhood listening to my parents screaming at each other in the background while I was trying to focus on doing my homework. And like almost to the point where I was so good at tuning it out, which is really not healthy when you think about, for a kid to grow up. And, I kind of became obsessed with love and relationships at a really young age. And that was because in my entire family, I don't think there's a single marriage or couple I can think of that is healthy on both sides of my family. There's a lot of, alcoholism, like cheating and divorce that's happened in my history, I would say. And so as a young girl, I had it in my head that, okay, one day I'm going to meet like a really great partner, this, knight on shining armor who's going to come and save me. And, we're going to have a happy ending. And of course, that didn't end up happening throughout my 20s. I just ended up repeating the same patterns as my entire family. And it was sort of this, I know when people talk about rock bottoms, it's very cliche, but I think I had several rock bottoms where I ended up dating so many people that mirrored the exact same dynamic that my parents had and my relatives had. And I thought, oh gosh, like I guess I'm next, right? I guess I'm just continuing on this toxic pattern. And that's how I started doing this work. I went to school, I became a therapist, and I learned like, oh, that's why I was doing that. That's why I was attracted to these types of men. That's why I kept reacting this way in relationships. It all had to do with my goddamn childhood.
Yeah.
And I just fell in love with inner child work. So yeah, I help, in a nutshell, I help high achievers break the cycle of toxic relationships so that they can find their person, find a healthy, long lasting relationship, which I was able to eventually have after doing a lot of work.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And I know that's kind of a vulnerable story, but I think it's so cool like how many people I get to talk to on this podcast who have turned their mess into their message and turned kind of
Yeah.
any of their little shitstorm history into a business or a passion project or a creation that is serving so many people exactly like you're doing and like I try to do. And so just thank you for sharing that. That's amazing. Yeah. And so one thing I wanted to follow up with you on there is what made you start to just study psychology or therapy specifically? Did you just know that's where your heart wanted to go because you were like, had this intuition that you thought that was maybe what was causing your relationship problems, or were you already studying that and it just kind of worked out?
Mm. That's a really good question. And I'm having flashbacks to when I was like 10 years old. I think the reason I became interested in psychology in the first place was because I wanted to fix myself. I had so many, coming from that sort of upbringing, I had so many anxiety problems and self-esteem, people-pleasing issues, which, that's how I ended up in those toxic relationships. So from a very young age, I know it sounds a bit weird, but I understood when I was little that it was psychology. And so I was really into that stuff at a young age. Um, and then when I became a therapist, that's when it all made sense, right? Then I was able to put everything together and see how to actually make changes in real life.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's so crazy. There are so many parallels from what you're saying that I can see with people and their diet patterns as well. Like
Mm,
we pick up so
yeah.
many things from our parents that we don't realize. Like, especially with women that I work with, I hear a lot about they'll, as we start working together, they'll start telling me stories about how their mom used to diet or just how she used to eat. And it plays such a role in then how you start learning about food. So it's very, very similar, I feel like, for how you learned about relationships or didn't want to learn, but we unintentionally pick up those things.
Exactly. Yeah,
And that's
no,
kind of the root
totally.
of a lot of that inner child work, right? So just to backpedal a second, like what is our inner child and how does it affect all of these areas of our life?
Mm. So the way I think of the inner child is it's your real authentic self. It's the version of you before the social conditioning, before the traumas, and before the rules and the societal expectations of what you're supposed to be or how you're supposed to behave. When I help people get in touch with their inner child, it's not literally like a real child. It's a concept, right? And the concept is that you are still the same person as when you were a kid. Same body, same memories. And that grown-ups, we're just big kids essentially. And when we understand who we were, right, before all of these things happened, it gives people an idea of what their authentic true nature actually is. So I get a lot of clients who they don't really remember much of what happened in their childhood before they start doing this work, and then they start realizing little things like, oh my gosh, I suddenly remembered when I was a kid, like I loved playing skip rope. Like I loved that I would, sit watching clouds for hours. And I had this curiosity, right? Like I had these different, I was very mischievous. I like to play pranks on people. And it's like, what happened to that kid? Right? Like what happened to, like, why don't I display those qualities anymore? And it's because those qualities are conditioned out of us as we get older, right? We start internalizing all these messages of, well, you're supposed to be grown up, or you're not supposed to be, daydreaming, you're not supposed to be doing this or that. And so we start to hide these parts of ourselves. And by getting in touch with that younger part of us, it helps us remember the totality of who we are, which we are complex human beings.
And so do you notice then when people have these, I don't want to say like wounds, that seems like the wrong word, but these areas that probably need attention with their
Mm.
inner child, how does that show up in, I know your specialty is relationships, but I assume that shows up in career, in how you view yourself, like all these areas of your life, right?
Mm. Oh yes, yeah. So very specific, and I'm a coach now, so I wear all kinds of hats.
Yeah.
I specifically work with people who are very good in their careers, right? They've become very successful in their business or their job, but that same success is not being found in their relationships, right? On the inside, it's a complete disaster, and that's an inner child wound right there, where you've had to cope with all the stuff that happened to you growing up by creating this facade of I got it all together, right? Look at me, my business is making this much money, I'm in this successful career. But on the inside, they're absolutely exhausted of trying to keep up this appearance, because despite all this success they're having, they're not able to sustain a connection with someone. And that's where the wounding is. So to answer your question, uh, things that show up with, and I do use the word inner child wounds. I
Okay.
think it's
That's
it's
okay.
yeah, it's very appropriate. It's noticing that there's total imbalances in different parts of your life. And I know you and I talked about the diet part as well, right? How some people might look, great on the outside, but then they're really struggling with that control with food, right? um, Relationships, right? Repeating patterns in your romantic relationships or even in your friendships, the same dynamics that happened when you were kids. So, a really common one is dating people that are emotionally unavailable, right? Or being almost hooked on dating people that can't give you that same love. And then you're just constantly repeating that same pattern over and over again in your different relationships. So that's a really big one. So yeah, overall is just noticing the same patterns in your adult life that showed up when you were a kid.
Okay, gotcha. And how are there like steps that work for everyone to start doing some of this work? I know a lot of it, I'm sure, is individual, but are there, if somebody just wants to already had a light bulb, maybe, and they're like, ooh, maybe I do that, or maybe there is that loop in my life, in my career, or in a relationship. What are some ways they can start to heal that inner child
Mm,
wound?
yes. A question I really like to ask people to get the process going is, who did you have to be for your mom or your dad,
Oh,
right?
that one already like makes me emotional immediately.
Oh yeah. Oh, I'm sorry about that.
No, no, I like it. I like it. That's good.
Yeah. And I know it's a heavy question, but like I really like to cut through the fluff, right, and really get to the heart of what's going on. And the reason that question is so powerful is you realize that so much of who you've become as an adult is based on what you thought you had to be to win mom and dad's love or approval, right? And for me, the way I was raised was I had to be perfect at everything, right? If I got, 90% at school, it was, well, what happened to the other 10%? And so I learned that in order for me to be loved and to get love from my parents, I had to be like a straight A student, or I couldn't show any weaknesses, right? I couldn't make mistakes. And then that became everything I did, like literally everything I did in life afterwards was the same thing, right? In relationships, I tried to be the perfect girlfriend. Career wise, I tried to look like I had it all together, right? It's pervasive. And so that question is usually where you start, right? Where did that all originate from?
Yeah, and it really brings out the strong conditioning that starts so early, obviously from our caregivers, but can persist for a long time.
Totally.
Like just my mind always goes to fitness and nutrition and just everything that we are told we need to be, we need to do, we need a certain way we need to look, a certain way we need to eat to feel worthy, to feel like if you don't do these things, you don't get to fit into this category of healthy in society, or you don't get to be rewarded and in this female body image that we create, right? It comes at us starting in childhood from our caregivers, but that conditioning and those who do I need to be, that comes from a lot of angles forever.
Yeah, I totally know what you mean. It's part of the culture too, right? It's very toxic.
Yeah, it's crazy to think about that and reflect on it. And one thing, we talked about on your podcast how we have some similarities in our childhood, and
Mm.
you mentioned people pleasing and being a high achiever. How have you started to heal those inner child wounds in your own life, and what changes have you seen?
Yeah, people pleasing, that's such a big one. So
Especially
what
for women. Yeah.
yes, especially for women. So the interesting thing is what a lot of people don't realize is people pleasing is actually a trauma response. So I'm not going to go into the nitty gritty, but we have the fight. Everyone knows the fight and flight response, freeze response, but there's a fourth one, and it's called fawn. And what that means is, in order to survive, you have learned that you have to please the other person. So if you think back to when you were a child, like as kids, your entire life depends on being taken care of by mom and dad, right? Or your caregivers, however you were raised. And so if you learned that the best way to survive was to please your parents or to make them happy, then you get what you want, right? Then they'll, you can sort of monitor their mood and maybe they will take care of you better. And so it really is a response that we learn from a very young age because it served a purpose for us at some point, right? It was beneficial to keep mom and dad happy. Otherwise, if they're in a bad mood, maybe they wouldn't put food on the table that night, right? There's a connection. But the problem is when we continue bringing that into our adult relationships. So I think one of the biggest things to start with when you're working on that people pleasing wound is learning to identify what your own needs are, right? Because that's such a people pleasing thing where you put everyone first in front of you. But then it's also taking the time to pause and ask yourself, okay, am I doing this for someone else or am I doing this for me? Right? Am I really, doing this thing because I think I want to, or is it because I'm trying to impress someone else or I'm trying to make someone else happy? And that's a really important question to ask because you want to get to a point where you're making decisions consciously and not making decisions as a reaction to someone else.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I hope
I
that
think,
answered your question.
yeah, I really like that. And I think that proving yourself, I think is an important point to highlight because I know that again with goal setting and kind of the time of year that we're in, that is something that I see a lot as far as people setting goals and not actually thinking about is this what I want? Is
Yeah.
this what I want to how I want to kind of pave the path of my next however many months, whatever it is you're trying to go after? Or again, coming back to that conditioning and what we've picked up in childhood and onwards, am I trying to live up to some expectation that I don't even know whose it is?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, so that is a really powerful question. Are there any other questions that people can use for awareness? Because I really like what you've shared so far, or like if they don't know if there's a loop going on, or if they aren't sure how to release some conditioning, or like, is that really up to me? Am I trying to prove something? Are there some other like reflection questions you like to steer people towards?
Yes, I love this question.
Okay, good.
The other thing that I think is really important to pay attention to is how you feel, right? So, people who have inner child wounds or people pleasing wounds, especially high achievers, we're so good at convincing ourselves that everything is okay. And we're so good at convincing everyone else that we're okay, that we don't actually know how we feel about things in the moment. So, back when I was stuck in toxic relationships, um, I would always ignore red flags, right? I would ignore that feeling when someone was obviously not a good match for me. And I would just like push it down and keep trying and trying. So in my current partnership, we've been together for a while, and it's funny that we both come from kind of broken homes, but where we've learned to become secure with each other. I don't feel that way anymore, right? And it's because I learned to choose people that feel safe for me. And for someone starting off, or for someone who's never grown up with safety at all, it feels kind of boring at first, right? It's like there's no roller coaster, chasing the other person, and it's not very romantic, right? And so we think it's boring. But that's actually what your body is craving. Like your body is so stressed out from chasing the highs and the lows all the time. And so to kind of give you a short answer is to say yes to things that give you peace and say hell no to things that are not giving you that inner peace.
Powerful, super powerful question. And that helps you, or I would think it would help someone reconnect to their intuition. Just like you said, like
Yes.
reconnect to how do I feel in this moment versus trying to follow that definition that somebody else laid out for you, trying to just follow the conditioning blindly because it's what you have done in the past or it's what you feel like you should do. Coming back to yourself and knowing you have so much wisdom inside of you,
Oh.
but that everyone does, right? But the problem is that we're all just so go, go, go that we hardly take quiet time to even think like, well, how do I feel about this? Right. And it sounds silly, but those answers, it's really hard for those answers to show up if you have 7 conversations going on in your head. Right.
Yeah. No, totally. It's
And
that hamster wheel, right?
yes,
Where we're always
yes.
on to the next thing.
Mm-hmm. And especially with high achieving, I like that you kind of brought up it feels boring. because I think that is another thing to highlight and embrace and maybe embody, because I also work with a lot of high achievers. I'm sure there are some listening, or I like to say recovering overachiever is how I refer
Yes.
to myself.
Oh, right.
But this this chasing of the high, like certainly in relationships I can see that playing out as like, well, this is boring though. Am I actually supposed to be with this person? But also in any type of goal you set for yourself, if you constantly move the goalpost forward, it's addicting, right? Because then you're
Right.
always climbing. You feel like you're always working so hard. So obviously success is going to come because you're working hard and you're struggling,
Mhm.
and that is the way to climb the mountain, right? But
Yeah.
what if you just gave yourself time to chill at the summit and just take in the
Right.
vistas and open that beer you brought up in your backpack or whatever it may be,
Right.
you know? It's allowing that stillness in times,
Mhm.
that boring time.
Yeah,
Can
exactly. Just chill out, crack open a beer,
yes,
do what Caroline said.
right? And that can open so many other doors that you didn't even know were there because you're rushing past them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Isn't it so funny that we're always working towards the next thing, but by the time we get there, it's like, okay, now on to the next thing, and we don't even get a chance to celebrate how far we've come. It's really
Seriously.
sad. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I actually did that this week, and it's something I've been working on, and I like it was almost like a split second of an out of body experience, because I like could see myself moving on when something I
Yeah.
had been manifesting came to me, came into my life, and I was like, do not move on from this. Like you are,
Yeah.
it was, I don't know, like 3 or 4 p.m. And I was like, you are ending work right now. And you
Right.
are just going to enjoy that this thing came to you.
Yes.
And the rest of the work you need to do will be there tomorrow, because you need to stop and frickin' celebrate. Like, but it was
Heck
really hard
yes.
for me. It was really hard
Yeah.
to not just be like, okay, on to the next thing. What else do I need? You know,
It is hard, isn't it?
it's
It
crazy.
almost feels like like I know that same because I'm the same way where the first time you do it, it feels like you're doing something wrong. Right? It's like, why am I sitting down, slowing down? But then, well, I'm sure you felt this too when you're actually celebrating. It's like, oh yeah, this is what it feels like, right? This is what it's supposed to feel like. Because it's
Yes.
if it's not feeling good, then you must be doing something wrong, right? Why wouldn't you want to feel good about what you've accomplished?
Yeah. It's like you cause yourself to resist that feeling good,
Right.
you know? Which that kind of comes back to the idea, I think, of enoughness.
Mm.
And I assume inner child plays a huge role with that. Is there would you agree? Is that something that you kind of see when you're healing your inner child? You get more of that embodied, like, I already am enough, I already have worthiness.
Absolutely. Oh, this gets me excited. You know, even back to that question that we talked about before, right? Who did you have to be for your parents? So, what a lot of people end up realizing is they realize that they were too much for one of their parents and not enough for the other. And so they kind of grow up with, well, this one person thinks I'm too emotional, I'm too this, and someone else thinks I'm not good enough, I'm not enough this. And now we're just constantly confused about, am I enough, not enough? But in either situation, the message you learned as a kid is that it's not okay to be yourself, right? And it goes back to that not enoughness you were talking about, where we're not born that. We don't start off that way, right? As kids, we're just going with where the wind blows, and we learn to internalize these things. But of course, the good news is when you become aware of it, you can also learn to change that and decide for yourself what enoughness really is, right? Because it's not a real thing. No one's going around with a measuring tape and measuring, you know, how worthy a person is, right? It's not real.
Ugh, that's a really good reminder. Yeah, you are the only person that gets to decide.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like taking that power back and not giving your power out to other people to decide.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Yeah. That's the hard part, right? Because people are judgmental, and you know, it's like the monkey mind is just, it's, you know, we're judging things constantly all the time. right? But it doesn't actually mean anything. And I think that's the hard part to really absorb.
And can you elaborate on that? Like, how would you kind of start to take meaning out of
Mm.
something?
Yeah, because you know how sometimes you're just walking, and everyone does this, right? You watch a show, you walk down the street, and your brain will just naturally form opinions on things, right? That's what the brain does. But just because you get a snapshot of something doesn't mean you know the entirety of what that thing is. I mean, I'm sure anyone can turn on the news, right? And there's some article about a celebrity, and then there's a million people in the comments like, I have an opinion about this, I believe that, I don't believe this, and it's just constant. And they're all so different, right? And it's because we're all just projecting our own thoughts and beliefs and experiences onto things. But the important thing is that none of these people are living your life, right? You're the only person in your body having your experience. And I know it's hard. I think, just to dismiss it and say, oh, don't listen to those people, that's not very helpful, because, it still hurts, right? It does hurt. So you can let it hurt, right? And sit with that feeling and, notice what's coming up for you. But then also decide for yourself, what you want that to mean, right? Do you really want it to define you, or do you get to choose, right, what those things actually mean to you? And of course, it's the second one.
Mm-hmm. And this makes me think I've had a couple clients actually recently who have told me in our sessions that they feel consuming certain social media posts around fitness or nutrition make them feel like they're doing something wrong. Like that
Oh,
is
yeah.
their first reaction. Like, say it's a 3 things you're doing wrong in your workout, like a
Oh, yeah.
very
Yeah.
clickbaity, like stop the
Mm-hmm.
scroll style post. I give them props for that. But then they read through it and they're like, oh shit, am I doing all these things wrong? Do I need to be fixing these 3 things? And that's why I'm maybe not as far along as I want to be. And that thought pattern is kind of the one we jump to when we're in that comparison
Right.
mode, when we're in that not
Exactly.
enough mode. But my advice when I have thought about it is very much mirrors what you said. Like, that post is not necessarily meant for you,
Mm.
right? They have no idea your experience, your training experience, your experience with your nutrition. They don't know if you are in a fat loss phase right now, if you're trying to put on muscle right now. As someone who posts on social media, you are kind of trying to talk to your ideal client, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there are generalizations that happen. So reading through posts like that, or consuming really any media and just thinking, oh shit, like instant comparison mode is never
Yeah.
going to serve you, right?
Yeah. Yeah, you're so right, right? They're just trying to make some money, right? They're paying someone to run their Facebook ads, right? They're trying to find their people. Yeah, you're so right. Yeah, they're probably not talking to you, right? If it doesn't feel good, then you're not the ideal audience.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, totally. And that's the other thing too about like choosing how you want to feel. If you are continuously scrolling past posts that are making you feel not enough, or like you need to change something
Mhm.
or you need to fix something, maybe follow some other accounts
Right.
that make you feel like, oh yeah,
Yeah,
I'm super in alignment with this one, because that's going to make a huge difference in your
yeah,
daily life with how much screen time we all use
exactly.
as well.
Yeah. Interesting thing you brought up, algorithms. Um, something that people may not have considered as much as, I think a lot of people, they like, oh, algorithm this and that. But the thing is, the algorithm is just showing you things that you already look at. And so, well, one of the things, this might be a little bit hard to hear, but I think it's important, is if you're getting a certain kind of content over and over, maybe that's telling you something about you, right? Maybe it's telling you about certain things that you search up. So, for example, I've had clients who have gone through, very low point phases in their lives, right? And then they kept getting more articles about depression, or why are you depressed? And it's because that's what they were Googling, right? And the algorithm was picking up on that and feeding them more of that. And so, my algorithm shows me stuff that I like because it's stuff that I'm already looking at. So if you're seeing the same things over and over again, I know it's kind of hard to hear this, but maybe that's an invitation to kind of look at yourself and seeing, what is it that you are looking at on the internet that's like feeding into this algorithm, and maybe it's telling you some you know things about yourself or self-esteem things that you kind of want to look at first.
Yep. Yeah, that's super wise because again, you have the power to start to shift what you're seeing and
Right.
consuming every day. Yeah. And one other question I wanted to ask you that I saw in one of your posts that I'm really curious about. I'm sure you wrote it in kind of the relationship lens, but I think this also applies to all areas of your life is when you know, let's say what you want in a partner. How do you know when making a list of exactly what you want is helping you versus holding you back because you're like perfectionist mode, high achieving mode?
Oh, good question. I get this question all the time.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm really not a fan of extreme checklists because I think an example is better. So I had this client who she had such a thing with height, right? So she dated men, and it's like they have to be this certain height. They have to be this certain height. Like I otherwise I can't give them a chance. And when we really sat down and looked at, okay, well, is it really about the height? Like what's going on? Well, it turns out it has nothing to do with the height. It was more about the fact that she thought being around a tall guy would make her feel safe, right? And she came from a very turbulent household, and everything was coming back to the safety, right? We think we want a person with a very specific job because they're going to have money and they're going to make us feel safe. Or we think we want a person from a certain background because it's familiar to us and then it's going to make us feel safe. Well, the reality is when it comes to emotional connection and feeling safe in a relationship, it's got nothing to do with those things, right? A tall guy is not any more guaranteed to make you feel secure than someone who's a few inches shorter. And the irony is she's actually dating a shorter guy now. And they're happy together, right? And it took a little while to get over the height thing, but she realized it was just in her head, right? It wasn't real. Now, if she had a bad experience with the short guy and then it was traumatic, that would have been a different story. But most of the time, the things that we think make a good partner, it's not really about that thing, but it's about that we've made a connection that we think those checkpoints make them a safer person for us. And that's not true at all, right? Safety comes down to how well a person responds to your needs, how much they validate you, and how willing they are to put effort in a relationship to meet both of your needs. Right? That's what a relationship is really based on.
Yeah. That makes so much sense. Like your body is always seeking that safety.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I think that definitely can be applied to other areas because some people get, super super specific with I know you're into manifestation, like things that you want to manifest, whether it's a partner or a job or fitness goals or whatever it may be. But if you're going to be specific, I'd say, okay, but knowing why those
Yes.
characteristics or
Mhm.
those things that you desire, why are those showing up? Because it's so often we choose those I don't really want to say surface level, but kind of like those
Mhm.
those things that we've just seen over and over
Right.
versus why do you actually
Yes.
want that? Like what would that look like if it came into your life? What would it feel like? And that's really where the magnetism comes from,
Mhm.
right?
Yes. I'm so with you on that, Caroline. And yeah, manifestation is a big part of what we do. I manifested my partner too. But just like you said, when we tell people to write what their ideal partner is, it's more about how you want to feel in that relationship, right? That you want to feel nurtured or safe or sexy. And not so much about well, he's got to wear, blue jeans every Tuesday. He's got to live at this location or this length of hair, right? Yeah, so it's totally, yeah, it's about the reason why.
Yeah. Yeah, that allows you to go so much deeper and I think it just makes
Mhm.
things easier to call into your life too because
Yes.
you
Hmm.
can then connect with the feeling be in alignment with the vibration. And that's when
Mhm.
I feel like everything just like sucks into your timeline, which is exactly what you
Exactly.
want, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
What are some other manifestation practices you use with, in combination with inner child work or just with
Mhm.
relationships specifically?
Yeah. Well, to piggyback off what you just said, it's that letting go of the how,
Oh,
right?
that's a powerful one. That's a hard one too.
It's really hard. Oh, girl, I know it's hard, right? And even with that list of qualities in a partner, you know how you want to feel in a relationship, but you don't know what person it's going to be, right? And that's why I encourage people not to have a type, because you don't know what your person is going to look like, right? They might be totally different from what you imagined, but if you focus so much on it's got to be exactly, this age, this height, whatever, then you're blocking the flow of what you really want, right? You're trying to control the process when in reality we have no idea. People meet their soulmates all the time, and it's rarely in a way that they expected it to be. So I mean, I met my soulmate off of Tinder.
Did you
and
really? Yes, I love
and
it.
yes, and there was a universal lesson in that for me, because before I met his name's Andrew, and we've done some podcasts together. I used to talk shit about Tinder all the time. I was like, this is a hookup app, like it sucks. I've never, it never works. And it was sort of like the universe kicking me in the butt and saying, how dare you, right? You're not in control. And why are you trying to control the process of finding your person, right? What if they are on Tinder? And because I had such a strong limiting belief around dating apps, I wasn't allowing myself. And of course, I met my person out there. So yeah, it's a funny story.
I love
Mhm.
that. And how did you practice releasing some of the how and releasing that control? Um, or even like the rules that you had. Like I'm not going to meet someone on a dating app because I find the whole surrendering, releasing control, letting go, whatever you want to call it, it's hard for a lot of people, myself
Yeah.
included. This is what I practice. I have
Mhm.
to make myself practice all the time.
Oh yeah, yeah. It is hard. And of course I still struggle with it too. Gotta be real about it. Um, I think I like having accountability buddies for things like this. So because when you're stuck, it's hard to see when you're stuck in it, right? So having mentors has been so helpful. But also when it when it comes to being stuck in those zones, it's really important to feel your feelings first. I think people worry that if they start feeling anxious, then they're just automatically going to attract all these things into their lives. But you shouldn't be afraid of any of your emotions, because they have to be expressed for a reason first, right? So if you're worried about not getting something, it's okay to sit with that feeling and allowing it to run its course. And once you've let that go, then it's just about reminding yourself, what is it that you want to feel when you get that thing, right? So if you really want to manifest relationship, it's to feel love, right? And then you can start doing things to step into that vibration of and frequency of love in your own life. So that could be watching romantic movies, or cooking yourself like a romantic date or something, right? And just kind of soaking in the energy of how it feels to get that thing you really want. I did that for a long time, right? I did the self dates and bought myself flowers. And I know it sounds really weird. It sounds cringy to someone who's never done it before, but I swear it does work, because once you let go of oh, this is so cringy, you realize it's just a feeling, right? When you're with someone you love, or when you're by yourself and loving the company of yourself, it's the same exact feeling. It's just we've attached meaning to one or the other. And so if you can get yourself to learn how to tap into that frequency of whatever it is that you want, for your audience, Caroline, it might be more about like fitness or health, right? Just get into that energy of what it feels like to be there, and start finding ways of invoking that same feeling now. And you'll realize that the ability to feel that thing it's inside you all along.
And that dating yourself idea and those, I mean, those are just like self-love, self-care ideas.
Yeah.
Like buying myself
Yeah.
flowers, I love doing that. Or, going out early and getting myself a special coffee beverage, like because my husband sleeps in later than me, so he's not going to do it. But even those little things, I feel like those are just great self-care. Like
Yeah,
give yourself some
absolutely.
attention, give yourself some acknowledgement, and that's only going to help you feel better long term.
Exactly. It's so true. And the part that people get stuck on is they feel that if you buy yourself flowers, it doesn't mean it's not as meaningful as if someone else buys it for you, right? And it's like, well, what's that telling you? Basically, you're saying to yourself that treating yourself nice is meaningless. That's what it translates to, right? And so, is that really going to get you into the frequency of love if you're not even willing to buy yourself flowers?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
It's the
something to
same
chew
thing
on.
with like acknowledging your body and acknowledging yourself. Like if you're not
Mhm.
willing to I'm I've gotten really big into mirror work lately, like looking
Oh,
myself in the
yeah.
eyes. I like to do it after I brush my
Awesome.
teeth
Mhm.
and give myself just some props basically for the day or whatever I want to say to myself that is nice and loving. And every time I recommend that to someone, they're like, I don't know, that's like a little weird. I'm like, why can't, if you want other people to be like, she's so hot, like she looks so
Mhm.
sexy in that bikini, you better be able to tell yourself that first. Like,
Exactly.
why is the external opinion more important than what you think about
Exactly.
yourself? Yeah.
So true.
Good,
Exactly. Like, what
good
is that
point to
really saying?
highlight.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, thank you for all of your wisdom today. This has been so fun. I feel like I learned a lot more about inner child than I knew before and how looking inwards again can just heal so many areas of your life and allow manifestations and abundance to come through
Mhm.
in so many areas of your life. So, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your time. And
Yeah,
before
this
I
is
let
so
you
much
go,
fun.
yeah, before I let you go, where can people find you? Where can they learn more about your coaching, your services?
Yeah, so I think people mostly know me from my podcast, which is it's literally called the Inner Child Podcast. So it's not very hard to find.
Aptly named.
Yeah. And it's a picture of like it's a pink backdrop. I'm not on it. But yeah, the Inner Child Podcast. Every week we have new episodes with very actionable tips on healing that inner child and how to attract the right kind of person into your life. But otherwise, the other place I hang out on is on Instagram. I love Instagram, and it's just at by Gloria Zhang. And my website is the same title. It's just bygloriazhang.com.
Cool. I will link all of those below. Definitely check out Gloria's content, you guys. It is beautiful and funny and educational.
I love my reels, that's for sure.
Yes, you do. I love them too. But yeah, thanks again for your time. And everyone, thank you for tuning in today. If you liked this episode, share it to your story, tag both of us, and we will share the love right back.
Thank you so much, Caroline. This was a lot of fun. And yeah, well, I'll talk to you soon.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Do you feel energized and refreshed now? I hope this episode gave you a little boost to get out there and start manifesting your fittest, healthiest life. If you loved it, please help me out by writing a review and sharing this episode to your story. And seriously, just thank you so much for being here. For daily updates of what I've got going on and to connect further, be sure to follow me on Instagram and head over to ccowellness.com to learn more about my one-on-one coaching and find additional resources there, including my Goddess's Guide to Macros ebook, plus a few freebies. And remember, you are strong, you are capable of achieving anything you desire, and you are worthy of all your wildest dreams.